Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two and figuring out just what is going on is always a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This episode we are reading The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, up to but not including chapter 15.
And I did mention, I think this last time, I should have, but I have read this book multiple times, mostly in college, as to be expected. So we're doing another one of those experiments.
You had this as like assigned reading multiple times?
Yeah, I think one was in like an American novel course, typical.
All right, fair.
One was, I think, in a grammar course. And then I think I also had a young adult novel course, which that one was the most exciting because I got to write fanfic for it. So,
oh,
yeah, we'll get into it.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, but my vibe when reading this book is always a little bit of depression, but then I get to the end and I'm like, there were some things that were worth it to read this book. So hopefully I feel the same way during the fourth time reading this. This is your first time though, John. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, I had some strong skepticism coming into this book, and I do maintain some skepticism because we're only halfway. That being said, I have kind of enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. Holden is quite a character.
Mm-hmm.
The way he like delivers everything he's saying it's kind of comical almost. He's got that teenagerly delivery, but a little bit self-important, right? Like it's got kind of a Ferris Bueller vibe to it, where it's like, I know what's up, you know, but also he's 17, so but it's been fun to read that angle and in that voice.
Yeah. Obviously, some people get upset by that he's acting his
sure.
age. And there is like this is a rich white kid complaining about the world. There's something a little upsetting about that whole angle.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that too, though, right? Like, especially as we get to the end of this half, obviously, like, his emotional state is escalating, and so it's not like my empathy for him has disappeared, but, like, the behaviors he's engaging in make you much more aware of the fact that he's a rich kid, right? That's kind of got the ability to do what he wants in response to what he's feeling. So that definitely rubs a certain way in some of the decisions he makes. I'm like, this is just stupid rich kid stuff, quite frankly. But that doesn't, for me at least, take away from, I guess, just the plain enjoyment of reading that voice, that teenagerly voice, and particularly the earlier parts of the book when he's still just a student. And yeah, he's a student at a boarding school that his parents are paying for, so the rich part isn't gone, but like he can be more of just a kid in that first part of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of the themes we'll probably talk about in the second part, if I do my job right, are universal, I would say. So
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like important to note, though, before we get into the book, and something we don't really do is talk about the author. I feel like when you're dealing with canon works like this, it comes up a lot more. Like if you're an English major, you have probably read at least a small biography of the author you are reading.
I think different too because we're dealing with an author who has passed away and is someone who wrote a book that's been around for a while. We mostly read relatively recent books, a few exceptions, but mostly relatively recent books.
Yeah, and Salinger has been around for a very long time. He's been pretty private about his life. But his daughter wrote an autobiography that included some stuff. Also, one of the women he dated apparently published something about their time together.
Oh, no kidding.
All this to say, we're going to discuss the death of an author. Obviously, that essay was originally intended for, like, the intention of the author not mattering in regards to, like, the analysis done by the audience.
Right.
But I think in our time, it's come to mean also the reputation of the author not really mattering once they're dead, like the separation of an author from their work, right?
Yeah.
People try to do it with Harry Potter, but it doesn't really work.
Well, right, there's kind of a feature of almost capitalism and that's intertwined with this of death of an author not being possible until the author is really dead, right?
Yeah. And of course, you could follow that all the way down and see where their estate is.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Right now, the Salinger estate is being handled by his son, who seems to not believe or care about Salinger, like J.D. Salinger and what he did. What he did was he, like, married a girl that was over a decade younger than him, When she was in college and he was like in his 30s,
Mm,
that relationship didn't go well.
I'm sure.
And then also he apparently wrote to and dated a lot of college-aged girls, some of them even dropping out of college to be
Oh
with him.
boy.
And so he kind of got tired of them, it seemed like.
Mm,
This is all alleged.
yeah,
Allegedly,
yeah.
he did these things. So when we talk about this book, it also doesn't matter what he wanted because he's dead, in the multiple meanings of the word, that he's dead in regards to his intention when writing this, and he's dead.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up those two angles because one of them is possible even if the author is not dead, right? To say like I'm going to interpret this despite what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
I just think we've come to care so much more about the other definition in the modern time of like, where is my money going if I buy this book, if I read this book, in some way that sends money in the direction of the author. Like, does that count as now supporting what they do? And also it's hard to say that it doesn't because then they use that money for things, right? So it becomes a much different conversation to the point where I'm like, I wish no ill will on authors. I do not want them to die, but it becomes a lot easier to have the full discussion about books sometimes when you're reading an author who is already passed. So you can be like both critical of the book and then like decide whether or not you want to be critical of the author, right? Decide whether or not you want to include them or not. And it's like, okay, either way.
Yeah, and we're just really including them here, I guess, to have this discussion. There is an interview, I believe, where Salinger says this book is basically partially somewhat autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
And there is like a biographical analysis you could do in regards to Holden and Salinger and the ways they're similar. We are probably not going to waste our time doing that. There's just no point. and also, if Salinger is a piece of garbage, which allegedly he seemed to be, then it's not worth my time to talk about him as an individual.
I think in this particular case, it's going to be more interesting of a conversation just to talk about it for what it is. Because I think if you include Salinger himself, it maybe will like sully the conversation because it'll be darker and more focused on some of his poorer behaviors in life. And that doesn't allow us to really explore Holden as a whole character anymore.
Yeah. But, that's Salinger. We probably won't talk about him anymore. And yeah, let's get into things. You're basically going to lead this entire discussion in regards to what you want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably be more useful in the second part, where I point out all the symbols and be like, look at this, as if anybody cares. So,
well, I'm excited for your insight, having read through it a couple of times to versus my one. So this being the one, not ahead of time. So I guess to start, one of the things that sticks out to me a lot in this book, and I wanted to be more like incendiary about this, and then I realized I actually do think it's a core of the book, but Holden is going through a lot when it comes to, I guess, development of sexuality. Like we mentioned, he's a teenager, right? And my original stance on this was, I think Holden is gay. Like I think he's like secretly doesn't realize it, but the real like core of his sexual frustration is that he's gay. And while I don't think this is an impossible option at this point, I do think it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I'll at least point out some of the things that made me feel this way. And correct me if you feel like this is just like a thing that happens in other literature of the time that I'm not aware of, but he does spend a lot of time talking about like how handsome people are around him. And when I say people, I mean men, right? Like I think it's an all boys school he's at, or at the least we're like taking place in the boys' dorms. So he's like talking about his roommate Stradlater and how he's like so handsome and like, I don't know, just he gets into comparisons of like, oh, like Stradlater's handsome, but there's like even more handsome boys at the school. Though I'm not even sure he believes that because he seems low-key obsessed with Stradlater. But he's like very into like just observing physical traits about his peers.
Yeah, it could be like an insecurity of looks, right? Like him comparing
like
himself.
Self-comparison. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point too, because that's often where it comes up otherwise, right? It's like, oh, like I'm comparing myself. I think why it doesn't feel that way here is because he doesn't talk about himself that much when he's talking about this. Like there are other moments where he's like, I'm kind of weak, or he like refers to himself as kind of soft. So I think he is thinking about that at his core. He just kind of dwells on the physicality of his peers. And like there's some other activities too. Like he kind of eggs Stradlater on a bit. Like he starts like pushing his shoulder or something, right? He gets like physical, and then they do end up getting in a fight, but like that's its own thing. They also kind of like wrestle a bit for a moment, right? Like there's these like it's kind of, I don't mean, I want to call it traditional, but like traditional for gay people paths of like him expressing kind of a sexual withholding that show up here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll extend that too to the part of his frustration that has to deal with Jane and Stradlater,
Mm-hmm.
because in the first part of him getting into his feelings about this, or like starting to obsess about them two going out on a date, it kind of comes from him obsessing about Stradlater's behavior. He's like really drilling in, like, Stradlater, who are you going out on a date with? Why won't you tell me? Like, I want to know who you're out with. Like, almost possessive of Stradlater, it feels like, because he doesn't know that it's Jane yet when he's asking all those questions. I don't even think he has a reason to believe it is. It isn't until he's like, oh, I think she knows you, where he's able to be like, oh, it's Jane. That's wild. And then that like gives him the additional energy to start obsessing about Jane. So it's just interesting to see him do that, like have that process of, I'm obsessed with what Stradlater's up to as kind of a sexual paragon among my peers, you know, and then have Jane be the focus, and him have this second level of obsession come back over him, where he's like, oh, Jane, my childhood friend who like I had some feelings for, like that makes this complicated. So like this is where I start to feel like, okay, maybe it's not that he's gay, it's just general sexual confusion, repression, whatever it is that he's dealing with. But it does seem to kind of come out for both Stradlater and Jane in succession.
Right. Which, like, by rights, obviously.
Yeah.
But, interesting. I have always seen, like, the sort of obsession as being about, like, the facade you put up around other boys. Like, the kind of conversations you have and the kind of actions you take, like the wrestling with each other, the talking about sex, like boys will be boys type of mentality. And for Holden, Stradlater is like the epitome of a successful boy.
Right,
because he's getting with girls, he's well liked by everybody, he's genuinely nice in the way that manipulative men are genuinely nice, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he's ticking all of the boxes of what you should be. So, like, I definitely think there's some weird repressed energy with him, but you could technically also probably dismiss it as, like, again, that wanting to be, or just Holden doing what he does a couple times in this book of, like, wanting to fit in to the scene, right? Like, he calls everybody a phony, but really he is like the biggest phony in this book.
Yeah, I guess it's the whole, do you want to be with that person or do you want to be that person situation, right? Of like, oh, you really admire them, but is it really that you just kind of want the life that they have? So I can see that being the case here for sure, right? Like especially the fact, just the way he describes Stradlater in such a positive light.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the most part, of like, oh yeah, he's getting what he wants, and you know, he basically respects him.
Right. It is interesting that respect kind of falls apart when Jane does come into the picture. It's possible he wants to be like Stradlater until he does something to Jane, right? Like, because Holden would never do that. Holden has a very different relationship with women in general.
Yeah.
As much as he tries to pretend otherwise. So, like, he can get along with Stradlater until he's, like, personally affected, I guess, by the behavior he's always thought was wrong, but Holden also plays into, because that's what boys do, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that line, because, like I said, he mostly sees Stradlater positively, but then when it comes to that, like, sexual interaction part, he's, like, not in support, at least at his core, of the way he approaches it, and he has skepticisms about it. So yeah, that's a good point, that like it's all different once it's Jane, and it feels like he feels violated by it.
Yeah, which are very interesting comparisons that could probably be made between Holden and Jane, but
interesting.
That's a second part conversation, and depending on how you read this book, I suppose.
Well, it's funny that we're talking about this weird interaction and then and Jane too, because I did think it was interesting of Holden to bring up like the one time he and Jane almost kissed, which I think is a very generous way to describe what he says, which is like the whole Jane's stepfather comes in and asks for cigarettes, and she just like doesn't respond to him, and he like asks a couple times and then gives up, and then she starts crying. And so it's like, okay, obviously there's something complicated here with her stepfather and their relationship, and Holden has even pointed out some kind of questionable behavior about the stepfather. I feel like they said something about him like walking around the house naked.
Yeah.
Things like that, where it's like, okay, like maybe boundaries are not being respected. So and then like Holden even asks her too, like, is he taking advantage of you? And she says no, but like he asked that question for a reason, right? So it's like very weird vibes. And for Holden, he seems to take this as an opportunity to comfort her in a very specific way. Like he's like, okay, like I'm sitting next to her, like holding her, but then I'm also kissing her around her face, basically everywhere except her lips. And it's like, like, why do we see this as different? And maybe he doesn't. I think Holden has a lot of contradiction in him, so maybe he just doesn't. But I don't see why he doesn't see that as the same as Stradlater.
Well, for one thing, Jane doesn't say to stop, right? I think that's important. Not that it actually matters in regards to consent in reality, but right. I think for like Holden and his view of consent, it makes a difference.
I think a little bit of this book, when it comes to like treatment of women, is comparing bad apples to rotten apples, in that like we can give Holden some credit because he is a lot better than his peers in some of these ways, right? In that he's not doing what Stradlater is doing, and also it's, I guess, 1940 something, so like there's things like that where like context matters, and it's like he's better than the rest. He's simply not going to be the sort of person to do this perfectly because he has no good example of that, right? So there's some credit to be given, but there's discomfort as a modern reader in seeing that happen, and then just like kind of the missing link of like him not acknowledging the relationship between those two things, at the least, like him and Stradlater, that is.
Yeah. There's also like probably a correction made in Holden's head where him kissing Jane is acceptable because she sort of reciprocates that intimacy by like holding him by the neck, right? At a later date, like, and they hold hands and like they do couple things without technically being a couple. But for Holden, it's like she's reciprocating, so then the things I did must have been right? Like she's not saying no, thus she is saying yes.
Yeah, I guess I interpreted some of that almost just platonically, though, right? Of like them like holding hands at the movies and stuff, like they're kids hanging out, spending a lot of time. I do think she loves him, right? It's just, it doesn't come off romantically from my perspective, but I guess I can see for like a young boy like Holden, him seeing it that way.
Yeah, I mean, he describes it romantically, right? Like the way a wife would hold their husband is how he sees their relationship. But I mean, yeah, just because Holden, this is like throughout the book, just because Holden is seeing something a certain way doesn't mean that's how it actually is, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's kind of a core thing in this book that he's like unreliable, almost feels too strong of a word, but that's kind of what it is, right? Like just the lens through which he is describing these, it's a certain angle, and it's a self-interested angle.
Right. And he says very clearly in the beginning that he lies about everything, right?
That's true.
So,
yeah.
But I do think his relationship with women and consent is an interesting one, because he actually pretty early on says he doesn't understand like getting intimate with somebody unless you've like had a conversation with them. And he actually has conversations with a lot of women.
Yeah, I mean, we see it a couple of times, like, which this book makes me laugh because it's like the things that it's willing to include. Like he gets on a train and ends up sitting next to his classmate's mom, and is like, oh, like, this is a good conversation. I might be kind of into her. Like, this is so extra. But it almost does seem like it develops for him in the conversation. Like like I see why he's saying it, right? The conversation, he's like, I don't see why someone could do that, because for him, like, he gets interested via the conversation, like getting into the conversation with them. Like that's where his thoughts of like, oh, maybe I could be into this woman start.
Yeah, and I think we see this with Sunny. Like, I think he's interested in the idea of being sexual and like being intimate with somebody, but obviously when he actually meets Sunny, it's like twofold, really. He tries to have a conversation, and then he also realizes that she is being forced to do this. And
Yeah.
so because of that, he is no longer interested in doing anything, right?
Yeah, it's like there is some respect at the core of it, you know?
Yeah. And you could read this in a queer way in two different ways, right? Like, it could be because he's trying to perform like a straight man, but he's not actually straight, he's gay.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I actually wrote a short little fic where we had to like take the style of one book and apply it to another. So I actually had a Holden coming out scene that I wrote for one of my college courses,
No
and I
kidding.
had him come out as demisexual because he actually
that's what
reads
that
a little
gives.
bit. It gives a little bit of Ace vibes
Uh-huh.
with him like wanting to be close to somebody personally, and like him not being actually comfortable with sex, but obviously he's feeling pressured to be good at sex. That whole kind of vibe going on.
Yeah.
So
No, it's funny you like named it, because that's really what it is. Like, that's what it's, at least that's what that sort of description of his like attraction aligns with. So that's it's interesting that you chose that. Yeah. I think, yeah, so it's important for this book to discuss the performative aspect, right? And like that distinction between, again, like, is he trying to be like someone or be with them? Because that's exactly what you just said. It reads like that, as far as like, is he trying to like force himself to like sex or get into sex just to like keep up with everyone else? Because I think that is reason enough for him to start engaging with this behavior of like, I'm gonna like have a sex worker come in and like figure this thing out. It's also funny because he does have the conversation with her, right? Like he's like, I want to talk to you, like I want to have a chat first, and she's like not really into that at all. Like, I could just see him never getting past that point, and like that would kind of lead me back in the direction of, okay, maybe it is like a queer thing. But at the end of the day, he is also just young. Like, he doesn't know how to navigate these things simply because he hasn't navigated them before. So how does Holden reach the point where he's like willing to engage in activity to figure out what he does and doesn't like, or what he does and doesn't want to do? Like, he's got such a mental block on it. I don't think he'll do it, and I don't think the incentive of inclusion and keeping up with the Joneses is ever going to be enough for him.
there's like a very real fear, I think, he has of being perceived, right? Like he can't like understand that some people are authentic in like the public sphere
Mm.
and are corny because of that. Like, I am cringe, but I am free, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he hasn't reached that level, and so he wants to like fit in, but he's like also oh my god, this is the most like half brain thought I've ever had. He wants to fit in, but like he's not willing to look ridiculous to do that, right? I think it's the most clear.
I kind of get that, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But like, he's not willing to look like a fool, and having sex with somebody means there's another person there. So he's like, that is the block, right?
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't want to be perceived as a child. He doesn't want to be perceived as unknowing. But like, sadly, he doesn't really have a choice, you know?
Yeah, it's tough, honestly. There's no winning that. It's like the thing where once you start trying, it's over, right? Like, it's not authentic anymore, so why start trying? Like, and this is not to say that other kids like Stradlater aren't like putting an active effort into the behaviors that they're doing, but I think how Holden sees it is that it is kind of authentic to their behavior, right? He's like, this is just what teen boys do.
Mm-hmm.
And his inability to do it makes him not a normal teen boy. And so it's not the problem of like, at least the way I perceive it, it's not even just the problem of authenticity. It's just like, well, I guess it is a problem of authenticity, but it's not like other kids aren't doing that. It's just that he is not them, which does feel very queer, might I say. But he's like, he's just unable to be that person.
Yeah, oddly enough, like, Stradlater and like other boys kind of don't meet the same level of judgment that other characters in this book do. Like, Holden is like really mean to women, to be frank. Like, yeah, he wants to know them, whatever, but he also is in his head calling them corny, calling them phonies,
ugly.
like calling them ugly. Right. Like he's being exceedingly harsh to them for playing the game in a similar way to all of these other boys, right? Like they're doing the same things here. Or they're even being authentic, right? Like the tourists being excited about the radio show. Like
right.
There is just joy to be had in being a little cringe, but like he just can't accept that from women, especially from what we've seen so far.
No, that's a good point.
Maybe he like identifies more with women. I don't know.
Yeah.
Which is also a little bit queer.
It is. It certainly is. Yeah, it's a good point too, because like you mentioned, like he said, he always lies. He introduces himself to people with other names, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is really the issue with that he's going through in this book, is he doesn't know how to be genuine. He doesn't have this idea that he is himself. It's only all in comparison to other people. Which maybe let's come back around to that, because that's a lot of what I want to talk about in the second part of this episode. But I think that's what this all kind of leads to.
Yeah.
Before we get more into this conversation, I want to tie up the like sexuality and I guess also interaction with women parts of this conversation. One hot take I have is that he should have just, I don't know how hot this take is, but he should have just given the $10 to Sunny.
Mm-hmm.
Because low-key, he gave her a hard time. So I'm like, also he told the guy in the elevator, Maurice, that he was loaded. So that's kind of on him. Just give him the $10.
That is an interesting, like, this might actually tie in more to what we're going to talk about next. But like, we know he's an unreliable narrator. So I am curious if he really said 5 or if Maurice really said 10.
I also had this thought. Yeah. If he really said 10. Yeah.
Yeah. Because very clearly Holden was disassociating in that elevator.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be surprised if he misheard, misremembered, whatever, you know?
No, I fully agree. But the thing is, either way, I'm thinking he should give him the 10, right? Because either he misheard and it's 10, and so he should just give him the 10, or he was kind of stupid, and so he should give him the 10. And it doesn't really seem like a great deal of skin off his back to do so. But I don't know, like, why this is the thing that Holden wants to, like, keep his ground on.
I mean, I think he wants to be manly, tough.
Yeah.
Right? And it's easy to do that with Sunny, right? It's not like she's going to fight back. She's basically the same age as Holden, right?
And she shows she won't fight back because she just comes and grabs the $5 and she's like, all right, let's get out of here.
Yeah, she's being very nice, all things considered.
Honestly.
Considering her circumstances. But like, when actually, and we see this throughout, like when actually being met with a man, somebody who is scary to a 16-year-old, which would be like any of these people, Holden will back down, right?
Yeah.
Not even just back down, he cries. And then I think has a panic attack.
Yeah, he like talks about, he talks about his whole "I'm kind of yellow" thing, which I've never heard that phrase before.
Well, yellow belly,
he's like getting
right?
into the whole like, is that what that is? Oh,
I think so.
Okay. Well, he talks about himself as soft for a while, and like that's kind of where he gets down on himself more directly than I think he does in a lot of the book up until that point. So, and then it's funny because at that point, realistically, he's being more honest by saying that, right? He's kind of soft. Like he's like, I'm like all bark and no bite. And then suddenly I'm like, I just don't know if I fully agree with that, because he's clearly willing to like get a rise out of people. Like he has his little fight, the real fight with Stradlater. I'm like, I just don't know what to believe for, how do I want to say, like his approach to social interaction.
Interestingly enough, I see that like in the opposite direction when he talks about like his gloves going missing, right? He can be confrontational, but he will never follow through on the confrontation, right? Like he'll never actually accuse somebody, you stole my gloves. He'll say, how did my gloves end up here?
He's kind of an instigator though, in that way.
Yeah, he's yellow in the fact that like he's too much of a coward to actually stand his ground.
He's not a throw the first punch kind of guy.
Yeah, which is interesting when he talks about like violence in general. He's like, if I'm going to hit somebody, like I want to have a weapon, or I wish I was blindfolded because I don't want to see their face. Like,
yeah, that's interesting.
He doesn't want like the actual, not physicality, but like he doesn't want to see the full consequences of his actions, I guess. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess he is kind of soft at his core, but like it's not a bad thing. He just needs to stop like barking though.
Yeah.
Yeah. To bring us into the next part of the conversation, a big thing in this book is Holden not, I'll say it two ways. One is like not acknowledging when things that are happening to him affect him, right? Like he's like, well, I'm supposed to be this way, so therefore this is how I'm responding. I think the other angle of it is just like he does care about a lot of things he doesn't claim to care about.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is the sort of genuine part of him trying to come out, and he's just kind of stifling it.
Yeah, I also think it's a lot of times he doesn't feel like he's being listened to, right? Like that comes up in the Spencer conversation of like, I think he starts talking about like how he's doing in English because it's the only class he's passing, and then Spencer just doesn't care or doesn't ask him about it, like doesn't dive deeper into what might be going on, right?
He's kind of old school about it. He just like lectures him.
Yeah, he does try to ask, like, why did you do this? And Holden, of course, like, lies and calls himself an idiot instead of confronting that. So it's, like, both ways, right? Like,
Yeah.
He doesn't feel like the adults in his life actually care and they're not looking after him. But then also, probably because of that, he isn't willing to open up and be vulnerable, which is, like, not something men are supposed to be anyway. So,
yeah.
And then, like, the brushing stuff off. This book is being written retrospectively, right? So he's writing that he doesn't care about these things, but obviously that might be different to how he actually felt in the moment. So he very clearly doesn't want to care about things, I would say.
That's fair.
And then there's also just, I mean, I think he does have depression. So I think he just falls into these feelings of like, he says depressed, he's always depressed as hell, but there's a little bit of apathy, I think, in that too. Like, it's hard to care about things when you, like, are kind of being, like, swallowed whole by grief and all of this other stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because my suspicion here is that the source of a lot of this is that his brother passed away, and that, like, was never fully addressed. He clearly loved him a lot, spent a lot of time with him, and like wrote that essay about his glove, which I was like, I like this little reflective activity that it's doing right now, you know? But like, it seems like that is the outlet that has not been pursued yet. And so that feels like a source of a lot of things that come later on. Like another sort of moment of depression evidence is when he is leaving the school and it's like, I was sort of crying and I don't know why, you know, where it's like, oh, like, I think this is the downstream effect of like you not addressing anything and kind of just letting things fall apart as a result. And now you're leaving the school and you know, you say you don't know why you're crying. I think you do, but it's the sum of, you know, not engaging in school and feeling bad about it in the end. And like, you had a community here that you didn't value enough and now you're leaving them. Like there's so many things that pile on because of his disengagement with the world, presumably since his brother passed.
Right. Which very clearly he probably did not get therapy for this.
Oh, no.
Considering. He does mention after his brother passed, he like broke all the windows in his garage. And his hand hasn't healed since, right? Like he still can't close it all the way. So obviously we have some lasting grief that is still affecting him physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
And he, very clearly can't let it go. Like, he still has the baseball glove. And we have, at the end of 14, I think, or maybe end of 13, he repeats a moment of the past he had with Allie, right? Like, he's correcting his mistake and being like, we're gonna go here together, we're gonna ride our bikes, which isn't what happened, but, like, he's still, like, obsessing over his treatment of Allie.
Yeah, he had guilt about that one.
Yeah, and I think school-wise, that probably ties in as well, because Allie was the smart one, right? Like, he was good at school, and he was the best of them, and all of this, which we don't actually know, Holden just says, but I guess we can believe it. And now we have Holden who's, like, wasting his education, wasting his life. It's kind of like survivor's guilt, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure Holden feels in some part of his brain that Allie, as the golden boy, should have lived, and Holden, who's wasting away and an idiot and not even able to act properly probably should not be around, right? And we see the suicide angle start to pop in a little bit.
No, that makes sense. It's interesting too because you get the sense with that composition that he is a fully capable student too, right? Like it's not to do with that, right? It is these other perceptions that prevent him from engaging in ways that he might end up feeling good about had he done so, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's interesting that he has the gray hair thing. Like one side is grays. That I think has the potential to represent a lot of different things, right? Like my perception is just him being kind of born down despite being pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like as he starts to talk about suicidal ideation, like almost end of life implication, right? To like start graying already very young, like to imply an early death.
Yeah. He doesn't have much opportunity to kind of just be innocent, especially when you're at this age where, like, I mean, he has extreme circumstances, right? But, like, even at this age, you're supposed to be, even in our time, preparing for college and, like, figuring out all of these adult things that feel impossible and you really should not be figuring out. Like, this is the rest of your life you're preparing for. And there is something very terrifying about that. Like, you need to have it figured out. And he kind of has nothing figured out.
Yeah, I think so much of what's informing this behavior at this current moment in life is it's a confluence of turning points, right? Like we're getting to the end of his schooling career for him to still be engaging in this. Like he said, he's left multiple schools before, but this one feels different because we're like reaching a point of pressure for him.
Yeah, and even reading from his internal thoughts, like we don't really have an idea of what he wants to do, right? And I think that's the case probably with a lot of these rich boys. Like, you have the path prepared for you, but you don't really choose yourself, right? Which it's like a privileged problem to have, I suppose. But I don't think Holden has ever gotten the chance to figure out what he wants to do, especially because he's so critical of a lot of things.
I think my thought on that, though, is even if he had even a structured opportunity to figure out what was going to come next for him, like he would have a lot of trouble with that because I'm not getting the sense that he sees a future for himself. I mean, especially once he gets direct about suicidal ideation, but I think he kind of sees himself as a lost cause.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I'm tempted to start sharing theories.
Okay.
So one of the base level ones is I don't think he's going to we'll see because there's a half a book left. I don't quite think he's going to make it all the way to his parents finding out he's out of school from the school.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that keeps showing up for him is that he does love his family, particularly like now his sister is a big focus for him. And so I think that will pull him home in advance because he's going to need some sort of support at some point. Also with that, there's a concern here because we just left off on him kind of at the peak of the depression that he's had so far. Like, I'm not tempted to believe that he, let's see, how do I want to say this? I'm not tempted to believe that his behavior is going to change anytime soon. And I'm not tempted to believe that he will go through with a suicide attempt. I think he's going to keep putting himself into situations and kind of testing his own actions with them. So I think this kind of erratic night that he's just had is like the start of that kind of behavior for the next couple of days.
Mm-hmm. I guess without giving anything away, I'll try. If you don't think he's going to make it to his Wednesday date, whatever, when his parents find out, do you think his parents will be in the book? Do you think we'll see their reaction to what he's done or anything like that?
I think it'll be pretty bad for him if we do. I don't think that's going to help his mental state. I think my answer to that question depends on whether I think he's going to have any major revelations between now and the end of the book, because I think he kind of has to in order to have a reasonable interaction with his parents. Now, obviously, he could have an unreasonable interaction with his parents, but then if that's going to happen, I think it needs to happen like now because he's going to have to respond to it. And so I guess I believe I guess I don't believe we're going to see his parents, and maybe we won't actually see the action of him going home early. I think we're likely to see him reach some sort of turning point, revelation, whatever, and then decide from there to bring himself home. But I don't necessarily think we'll see that.
Okay. Are there any characters you do think that have been mentioned, I guess, that we're going to see? I guess you can't speak to characters you don't
that
know
I'm
about.
not aware of yet, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, we know he's obsessed with Jane. He's mentioned calling a few people.
I think no.
Okay.
Honestly, like, I think my thing about Jane is he didn't see her when he had the chance.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's far too nervous about that idea to do so if he wasn't willing to do it when she was in the same building as him. So and also, like, he's got the concerns about, like, his parents finding out via other means. And if I'm going to stay in line with my theory, I don't think they will. So I think if he sees Jane, that puts that at risk. So I think no. I don't think he'll see his sister ahead of time too. I think if anything, he's going to want to go home for his sister. So I just feel like this part of the book is him exploring on his own and having new experiences. So I'd like to think it's not going to. I think it's going to be more cerebral than, like, directly interfacing with the people from his past.
Okay, and there can be benefit in new experiences because it doesn't seem like any of the people he's networked with, I'll call it networking instead of actually getting to know, it's not really been helpful in regards to who he wants to be, whoever that is. I don't know.
I think he's going to keep pushing his limits of, like, performance of who he's going to try to be and, like, what he thinks he can and can't do, and, like, keep finding his boundaries until he, like, reaches a reasonable conclusion about who he is.
Okay, so you do think he's going to come to some, I mean, this is a coming of age story, so you think he'll have some big moment at the end?
I think so. I think part of what's informing that is that this is an older book, honestly, but I'm not 100% sure. I would put that as my guess, though, that yes, he will have some sort of, I guess, growth moment, we can say.
I mean, that's a fair assessment to make.
Yeah, he doesn't have to, but I just see it.
I mean, this is a pretty, like, normal book. There isn't really much else to theorize on, to be fair.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot more to talk about. A lot of symbols. We didn't talk about the hat once, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
But we'll talk about it later.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see, too, if his brother comes up at all in the second half.
Which one?
DB.
Okay.
The Hollywood one.
The prostitute in Hollywood, yeah.
I think I want to know what more of that background is, because he's like, I hate the movies, you know? And I'm like, does he hate the movies or did he hate his brother first? I don't know if he's going to talk about it more, but I'm curious why such a bitter taste about this brother.
But yeah, I guess that is the first part of The Catcher in the Rye. We mostly talked about being queer and depression, which go hand in hand, really. So
unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about these things again, for sure.
Yeah. I also I'm hoping I like this book in the end, because right now I do. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was so sure that you would not like this book, because he is kind of annoying.
I think only because I'm, like, willing to, like, read his whininess as a bit comical, right? I think if I was, like, taking him too seriously, I would not like this book. Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah. But as always, if you have your own thoughts and theories, all the socials are in the description. And thanks for listening.
Bye.